A fantastic piece of in-depth reporting by the Miami Herald has revealed shocking new details about a 2008 plea deal that Alexander Acosta, then U.S. attorney in Miami, offered billionaire hedge fund manager and serial sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was a money manager for the wealthiest elites in the country. He owned 2 private jets, the largest single residence in Manhattan, an island in the Caribbean, a ranch in New Mexico, and a waterfront estate in Florida. His friends include people like Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and Britain's Duke of York, Prince Andrew. But behind the scenes, Epstein was running a horrific, pyramid-like underage sex scheme, offering $200 to impoverished and troubled 14 to 17-year-old girls to come to his home and give him massages. Once they got there, he offered more money for increasingly vile and exploitative sexual acts, and also paid them to recruit other young girls. An FBI investigation revealed what the Herald calls a sprawling network of victims and an abundance of physical evidence and witness testimony, including notepads seized from Epstein's home with some of the girls' names and phone numbers. The FBI had enough material to produce a 50-page indictment with federal sex crime charges that could have put Epstein in prison for life. So, what was his sentence? Unbelievably, this evil pedophile monster served just 13 months in a county jail for his crimes. And it gets worse. In those pathetic 13 months, Epstein's so-called cell was a private space in a vacant wing of the jail. And he was allowed out to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in his fancy office, despite the county sheriff's department rules explicitly forbidding sex offenders from qualifying for work release. Then, after his sentence, Epstein reportedly traveled extensively, even receiving permission to visit his private Caribbean island, an exceptional privilege for a felon on probation. So, how did Epstein get away with all this? That's where Alexander Acosta comes in. As the local U.S. attorney, it was his job to prosecute the case. But Epstein had a powerful list of lawyers on his side, including Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz, former Whitewater independent counsel Kenneth Starr, and Jay Lefkowitz, who just happened to be Acosta's former co-worker at the well-known Washington law firm Kirkland & Ellis. So, Lefkowitz scheduled a meeting with his old colleague, Acosta, to discuss Epstein's case. They reportedly met for breakfast at the Marriott Hotel in West Palm Beach. As a result of that meeting, Lefkowitz walked away with an extraordinary plea deal that not only led to Epstein's outrageous 13-month jail sentence, but also included a non-prosecution agreement that effectively shut down an ongoing FBI probe into whether there were more victims of Epstein's depravity. The deal required Epstein to plead guilty to just 2 prostitution charges in state court. Beyond vastly understating his crimes, those charges are blatantly ridiculous given that his crimes were against minors who by law can't consent to sex and thus can't be prostitutes. Epstein was required to register as a sex offender and pay restitution to the 36 victims identified by the FBI, but in exchange, he and 4 of his accomplices, whose identities are still hidden, received immunity from all federal criminal charges. And, as part of the arrangement, Acosta agreed that the deal would be kept secret from the victims, who are calling for justice against Epstein. The Herald's investigation also found that Acosta and his team actually helped keep the case quiet. One email from Acosta's fellow prosecutor, Marie Villafana, to Epstein's lawyer read, quote, "On an avoid the press note, I can file the charge in district court in Miami, which will hopefully cut the press coverage significantly. Do you want to check that out?" What? It is absolutely shameful that Acosta and his team bent over backwards, not just to reduce Epstein's sentence to practically nothing, but to hush the whole thing up. Have you ever seen a more sickening example of the elite looking after its own? Quite rightly, a number of lawmakers are now calling for an investigation into all this by the Justice Department Inspector General. The Labour Secretary himself has refused to comment, but back in 2011 he did write a "to whom it may concern" letter in response to outrage over the deal. In it he says, "Our judgment in this case, based on the evidence known at the time, was that it was better to have a billionaire serve time in jail, register as a sex offender and pay his victims restitution than risk a trial with a reduced likelihood of success." See what he did there? He's basically saying, guys, this is a billionaire we're talking about. You're lucky he got any punishment at all. What an outrage. He's admitting that there's one law for the rich and one for everyone else. That's not good enough, Alexander Acosta. You helped cover up a billionaire's pedophile sex crimes on an epic scale. Now you're in President Trump's cabinet. And I think you owe all of us an explanation and an apology. And if you can't do that, it's time for you to go. Tell us what you think of this story at Steve Hilton X and at NextRev FNC.